I was invited to talk, and I thought that, I mean, the only person I really knew enough to have this conversation was Bartomeu. And I asked if Bartomeu could join me even before we knew what we would talk about. Now it sounds like if we have prepared something really serious, but we didn't. I thought just what's important to understand at the origin of this conversation is Bartomeu is the first museum director who gave me my first, I think, solo show when he was director of Witte in Rotterdam, 1997. Which at that time, I mean, really it was I think it was really my first solo show ever. And I realized that since 97, there is so many things that changed in the art world. I'm interested in that period because I think no one really, I don't think I'm wrong when I say this, I don't think no one really wrote anything yet, serious, about what happened in the last 30 years. And I thought it would be interesting just to go over in a very informal way about all the changes that happened in the art world since we first did this show together. So how do we start? First, maybe how did we meet together?
No, that is a bad question because I don't remember how we met. Probably we did meet in Brussels in the late 80s, early 90s, when Brussels was the center of the world. And
I thought it was today. Can I have a microphone? No. Only one? Oh, fuck, okay.
That's the problem.
I thought Brussels is the center of the world today, no?
Well, that's another talk. That's another panel discussion.
But why were you in Brussels at that time?
I was in Brussels because I got my first job in a very fabulous non-profit association called Fondation pour l'Architecture, where I was invited to do a program of exhibitions and I invited artists, which was the only thing that I could imagine at that point. And luckily enough, we were active for 5 years, and that spirit is what that experience generated is also what animated Philippe Rottier, who is a patron of the arts and of the debates about traditional architecture, decided to fund a new institution called La Loge, which is located across the street from the Fondation pour l'Architecture, and it is based on a beautiful temple of a Freemason loggia that was the first one to accept women in their activities. So in that little temple on the corner of the Rue de l'Hermitage and the Rue de la Vanne that is continuing. But that's, if I continue, we're gonna end up in another region of that has nothing to do with what we wanted to say. But before I leave, I give you back the microphone. I wanted to only say that this is not going to be about nostalgia, but about how much the system and the situation changed. And it changed, first of all, because it got bigger. I mean, at the time, we had the sensation that we were just a few artists, curators, and so on, and that we could know each other by name. And I remember at the time a great friend of this festival, oh my God, what's the name of the, okay, there were this fantastic couple whose name I can't remember right now, who were inviting us. Probably we met there. We met at a dinner at these people's house.
In which country?
In Belgium, Brussels. They were inviting people like us for dinner, and we could eat and drink as much as we wanted. So I think we met there.
That's why I don't remember.
Exactly.
Anyway, and I confirm that I don't think either of us are very nostalgic people anyway, so there is no risk. But so would you say, I mean, even though my memory is terrible, I kind of like to try to remember what was the situation. In fact, you're right. I think first of all, and since we are in a festival about video, I would say that the thing I remember clearly from 97, late 80s, early 90s, that it was kind of very complicated to do video work because there was no infrastructure that was prepared. I would like you to have to confirm that as a institution director, but I don't think it was so easy to show any video at that time.
It wasn't easy at all. It was a pain in the back because the technology was very complicated. You know, at the time, the projectors were these horrible machines that we used to call Barco. And but the Barco needed a technician that would fine-tune with a million buttons and a million keys. Would have to be fine-tuned for to have a correct image. And I remember doing a project. One of the first projects was with Judith Barry, and we ended up projecting a video image onto a curved screen.
I know that.
Okay. And that was, I mean, I can tell you that half an hour before the opening, with people at the door of the institution, the projections were not working.
Which still happen today. So
yeah, but the technology has changed a lot. Now you press, you put the projector on, and it focuses, you know, it by itself. It does a number of things that were unthinkable at the time. By the way, Conrado just helped me. The name I couldn't remember is Jean Conrad and Isabelle Lemaitre. Yeah. So sorry. They should be here, but okay. Yeah, but Isabelle and Jean Conrad Lemaitre had the very great idea of inviting people like us for dinner every once in a while.
I've met them only in London much later.
But wasn't it a good idea?
Yeah, it would have been a good idea.
No, technology changed a lot, and I saw in probably, I don't know if you were in the exhibition that the Stedelijk Museum in Eindhoven, the Van Abbe Museum, sorry, in Eindhoven, under the direction of Jan Debout, did an exhibition in a building, in a facility outside of the original building. It was nearby the football stadium, and in that exhibition, the title of which I can't remember, there were a number of artists, probably including you, that started using the language and material of film and video projection. The Tacitadine was in there, Douglas Gordon, Steve McQueen, Pierre Bismuth, and so on and so forth. And I realized that a generation had changed, meaning when we were all younger and we were living in Brussels, we would go, or I would go very often to the openings of the Van Abbe Museum. I remember Dirk Snauwart would drive his car, and you remember that too. And we would go to those openings, and those exhibitions were about sculpture, physical material, three-dimensional things. The exhibition I'm talking about was not about volume. It was about time, and it was about sound, and it was about darkness.
Do you remember which show was that? Do you still speak about the Van Abbe Museum piece?
Yes, that show on the facilities outside.
Yeah, it was a great building that they had. I think they were starting the building of the new museum, and they had this great, fantastic place. It's possible, I don't remember, but I don't. It's possible. It's possible, but it's true. It was the early days of. Yes, I know what you mean. I think the title. You're right. The title of the show was Cinema, Cinema. I think no. Yeah, true. True, and I remember absolutely. There is a nice catalog actually. And speaking about the Barco, who was? Can we digress on other artists?
Sure.
Is that Diana Tetter? who was doing those great pieces with Barco, with the images where like he was actually playing on untuning the Barco system, so you would have the three colors separated, which I thought they were fantastic works. I wonder how you can do that today. I mean, how do you actually? It's a very interesting question. Her work was based on this technology that do not exist anymore. I was wondering how do you do now?
This is very interesting question. There are a bunch of technologies and effects that you have to fake today. That is one of them. Another one of them we found out when we showed the work by Joan Jonas called Mirage, which is now in the collection at MoMA. There was a television TV set had to be like when you could tune when you had to tune the television as you were tuning the radio, you could get a sign which was like a line of light which would go from one side to the other of the screen. This is impossible to do now. We had to fake it. We had to fake it with a computer, record a DVD and put it on a loop, because it's impossible to do. And this is interesting. It's like someone should write about what you know, all this material that has disappeared, that artists are missing now. I mean, you cannot, if you wanted to do the Diana Theater without the Barco projector, I mean.
But you, for example, do you have any of Diana's work in the museum? No, because I guess you museums probably have the Barco in their collection, because the Barco, no?
It's like a slide projector. I mean, and the squared box monitor. We bought a bunch of them 8 years ago, because monitors will also disappear. You know, the box monitor, the tube. The slide projector, it's like, you know, Tacitadine has also started a petition to protect film, because film is going to disappear from the market. There will be no film being produced, no film being restored, no film being developed.
Even though Kodak has decided not to stop the production of celluloid.
Well, that's new. That I didn't know about it. But
Fuji stopped the production of celluloid, and Kodak apparently, which I think is clever because they are the only one on the market now. So anyway, Kodak decided to postpone the end of the production of films. But I'm not sure I follow Tacita on that thing.
Well,
Tacitadine is really fighting against the disappearance of celluloid, because she defends the idea that her work is about material, medium, and that she needs the medium of film to develop her work. Since I'm not a very sensitive artist in that sense, and I don't care so much about the medium, and I believe that artists can develop any kind of project on any kind of support. So, I mean, the Diana Theater thing is a very good example. Artists are sensitive to everything, so if it's a Barco, it's a Barco. And I'm sure now artists will take on newer technology, and the fact that we are losing film to go towards digital won't change anything about creativity. So I must say I'm a bit lost in that. And the only thing I understand in that discussion, and it's also interesting because we are talking about the change of time, is that the idea that we have to improve technique, and that the passage between film and digital is necessary, is a lie, basically. Because it's not necessary, it's just economically speaking, it's forced, because there is so much money involved in that change of technology. That's why we have forced now to leave film. But otherwise, it's going to create much more trouble than anything else, because we know how long a film lasts, but we don't know how long a digital copy is lasting. Probably less than 100 years anyway.
So one thing that happened while we lost our youth in that period is that film appeared and film disappeared. So there we have a big difference.
Filmed appear in the museum environment and disappeared probably like, I mean, yeah, quite recently.
Sure. I mean, and other than
And
that,
I must say, video appeared and disappeared as well.
yeah.
So I remember I had a conversation with Nicholas Loxdale, the director of the Listen Gallery, who I joined in '97, I think. And he was very embarrassed that I was doing video because he didn't know how to sell that. And then somewhere around 2003, he was kind of complaining I didn't do video anymore, saying it was the new thing to be involved with because he had collectors to be very interested in video. And it seems like, I think this is already gone, no? I think it seems like no one is so interested. I mean, the public interested in video, or at least collectors being interested in video, is not, there are not so many anymore, no? Am I wrong? What do you think? I mean, maybe now it's not the right place to talk about that, but I have the feeling that, sorry? It's a kind of, for me, it's a kind of territory that needs to be defended again. It's not that there was a moment that everything had to be video somehow. So I think this is a big change.
I have an anecdote that I want to tell. In 2002, I curated the Taipei Biennial, and with a co-curator from Taipei, we visited Beijing, and we saw Million Artists studios and so on. And in one of the, going from studio to studio, we entered a shop of DVD, illegal copies of DVDs you could buy. There were about millions of DVDs in the shop. There were even films that had not been released yet in Spain. I remember a Julio Medem film that had not yet been released in Spain. I bought the DVD there. And my Taiwanese colleague, Chachi Wang, told me, in China, they skipped video. And I said, what do you mean they skipped video? And they said, yeah, they went from nothing to DVD.
No VHS.
No VHS, no video. They started with DVD. And I thought that was an interesting comment. That was an interesting image. An entire region of the world ignored and will never go back to the experience of the VCR and the VHS tape.
It would have been better to go from nothing to digital without any support, like to go from nothing to internet with no any idea that there was VHS and DVD in between.
That's Africa.
But by the way, I remember the time when the galleries had to think about how to sell a video. The whole game was to try to make it an object and how to present a video in a box. Yeah, the box was very important. And so the whole game was to try to transform a video into something that you could present nearly as a sculpture with a very nice box. And we had like specialized people to make those very good-looking boxes.
Did you do any box?
Yeah, I did one or two, I think, with the Listen Gallery.
And one of the things that belongs to also this part of history for the book, I'm making the list of contents for the book I'm going to write based on the idea that Pierre gave me this morning. But one of these chapters is how did video and the video projection become so popular in large international shows. My theory is that it's because of economy, because it's very cheap to transport a video, a DVD. And you skip crating, you skip insurance, you skip the heavy costs of transport, and it's much more entertaining. What do you think about that?
I started to be involved in shows about art and film and video around 95, I think. And even though I never considered at the time my work had anything to do with film and video, but I was using video because I was interested in the notion of duration. Anyway, so I ended up by being participating of many shows about video and films. And did I lose myself now? Or you said. Oh yes, and so I wrote many. At that time I was totally. I was at the same time saying yes to the whole exhibition because an artist needs to show works, but at the same time I was producing text about how much my work had nothing to do with films and video, but I was complaining a lot about the fact that I thought at that time I had a feeling that video was used by curators mainly because it kind of forced the viewer to stay more than 2 seconds in front of a work because you know there is a kind of duration. And I really hated that kind of control on the viewer time. And at that time I remember my strategy was to do video of 2 hours long duration, because I wanted to make it clear that knowing that nobody will ever stay 2 hours in front of video, I wanted to make it very clear that you don't have to stay in front of that piece more than 5 seconds if you want. So I think that was really my reaction to this idea. I really felt that curators were trying to control viewers by pushing them to really stay, let's say, 10 minutes in front of the work.
There is another element that changed, or let's say another chapter of the book, is the fact that video and the moving image brought sound into the art gallery. And I know Pierre's work has a lot of the work Pierre has done has a lot to do with the problems of sound and perception and time and so on. But that introduction, bringing sound into the gallery space, created another problem, and is that for centuries, especially during the 80s, I remember the debates about the construction of new museums were centered around the dichotomy of whether there should be natural light or artificial light as the best conditions to view a picture, okay? No one thought that 10 years later the problem was going to disappear because the rooms would be darkened in order to allow projections to be made, and that sound would be the natural material associated with moving images, and then you would get into a cacophony. Go to museums and you'll see that the galleries are made for the eye. The galleries have nothing to do with the sound conditions, and there are terrible echoes. And this is where you get into another generation. I think right now we have gone past the problem of the moving image and we entered the problem of the sound condition. You know, how much money you have to spend in conditioning a room, a gallery, for proper sound perception.
I do remember, it's good, I do remember the first time I saw Rodney Graham installation, I think at Witte, with those crazy panels on the wall. It was like science fiction, really, literally. I was like, this is brilliant.
And they're horribly expensive.
Yes, and still are, I think. But that was really early on, and that was really like a shock for me to realize that there was even a technology existing to resolve that sound problem. But sound is still sound is actually still a very big problem. I did 3 shows with the piece I was talking about this morning. Only the last show was actually kind of okay in terms of technique for sound reason, because a gallery is basically, most of the time, it's a concrete floor, usually polished, bare walls, bare ceiling, flat, so it's the worst condition possible to have a sound piece. It's echoing. And usually, I don't know for what reason, galleries do not want to spend any money on carpet, which I think is the easiest way to resolve the problem. I would even put a carpet on the ceiling if I was a gallery owner, because you don't look at it.
That's very original. So, no, but that's another condition. That's another change that I think it belongs to the, or it's a directly inherited from the avant-gardes of the early 20th century, but there is still part of the art history, I believe it's not yet written, and it has to do with the fact that the avant-gardes of the early 20th century were as much engaged with sound as they were with images. The problem is that that sound tradition partly is lost and floats in a limbo. Partly it's gone to the history and the tradition of experimental music, and partly has been absorbed by rock and roll. But it's not yet integrated into the main, when you see the most important, the 100 most important artists of the 20th century, 99 are painters, and normally John Cage is not associated there. So I don't know what I was trying to say with this, but probably it had to do with your, I wanted to insist on the relevance of sound and the acoustic perception in your work.
But I was thinking about something else now. I was thinking about, I had suddenly an idea of something that I think has disappeared since, is the importance of theory in art. I still remember in the 90s, when we were doing a catalog, we were looking at who could write an essay. And I think, in a way, that anxiety about who could be a good theoretician to write an essay has totally disappeared. Yes. So, did they disappear, or is that like, they still exist, but we don't need them anymore? Like,
in my opinion, the art system has expelled them. I think the theoreticians are there, mainly in the universities, in the academy, but the art system doesn't ask. Doesn't need them.
So because the necessity, I mean, for anybody who was interested in theory, of course, it was very interesting. I love that part, I must say. I really love that part of having a text produced on the work. For more commercial reason, it was very important to have a very important theoretician to produce text, because that was the way to validate the work. So if those guys have been expelled from the art world, what's validating a work today if it doesn't go through this theory?
I don't know, but my feeling...
But do you share that feeling that theoretician has disappeared? I mean, it should be an open conversation.
Let's vote. Who thinks theoreticians have disappeared?
Theoreticians have disappeared. They have disappeared.
You agree with that?
I do, but I don't think it's the artists who expelled them. I think it's more like the galleries have expelled them, so they can cut costs down, because the catalogs are not being made, and the catalogs that the museums make, they're there to be sold, while they should be given away. That's the only way you can consolidate an artist's work.
Well, I think...
Why would the artist expel? Why would the artist expel the theorist?
I think personally, that change is the most important change that happened since the 80s, to my opinion, is the disappearance of theory. Qu'est-ce que t'en penses, Desi? T'as une idée de ça ou pas? It's a theoretician of it.
I mean, because what do you call theory? You mean academics, philosophers?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people used to.
I think the artwork has produced its proper theories now. There are a lot of people circulating in the artwork producing sort of theory. No?
I have the feeling that the market moved in such a way that, again, what was necessary to validate a work and make it look important, it was not necessary anymore for some reason. And I disagree somehow that it's purely economical reason. I think the rise, I tell you what, I think the rise of the art advisor shadowed somehow the necessity of the theoretician. They took over because I think that's more, I must say it's interesting here, we're going to start a polemic. I think the rise of the art advisor that came with the rise of the collector and the fact that there was many more collectors that started to appear that made the theoretician disappear, because my feeling is that in that system of sort of like it's economically it has to be much faster. Nobody wants to get bored by reading a text or whatever, but the advisor does the same kind of job in 5 seconds.
No, but most really good exhibitions are accompanied by readers, written by curators, theoreticians, and if people are too bored to read them, that's their problem. But they are there, and I think it's very important that they continue to be produced. So I don't think
But
we're
you don't have this
I think it would be very, very sad.
There are less and less.
But you don't have this feeling that there are kind of dinosaurs that kind of disappeared through the arrival of advisors.
But isn't there a shift from the critical theory that you find in a catalog or an essay that might have been shifted towards the publication, so the art forums and the Frieze magazines, so they've kind of been not appropriated, but redistributed in a different fashion, in a way where, in a place where there is advertising and which is very in tune with the market, but that there's a platform for that there,
Yeah.
albeit shorter.
Look at the catalogs of the big auction houses. They are thicker and thicker, and in the first pages you have pages with the pictures of those who write texts in specialists in different areas. And there are many. And look at the I think the expertise has shifted from the museum world and the critical world to the auction houses. That's the only, because, I mean, there are two things that are pretty new. One, if you saw, Art Basel last year published a book thick like this, what in French we call une brique, a brick, about, and it's about, Art Basel doesn't need the art critic anymore, it just will publish its own history and its own validation, right? And I think it's if you think of the it's a logical capitalist strategy, in the sense that you do not only develop the product that you sell, but you also cultivate and end up owning what the channels that make your product exist in the market. And it's like the same idea why Telefonica, for instance, is interested now in producing content for the lines of transmission that they control. But then you have also several galleries that send you these magazines about their artists showing all over the world. And it's like they don't need Frieze or Art Forum anymore. They'll just send you their own magazine.
But actually, that's one big change. I mean, the rise of the art fairs that we should have thought immediately about. This is a really big change, and I think that's also part of the. I mean, it's all this is the same logic. Rise of the rise of the art fairs, the rise of the art advisor, disappearance of the theory. I mean, that's all the same thing, no?
The disappearance of museums is next. I'm serious. No, I am really serious. I mean, what museums used to be is no longer really the priority of museums, and I think the big changes, probably we have this conversation 30 years from now, and we meet back here again, probably one thing that we will talk about is, oh, do you remember when museums did so and so, or right? And that's also a logical. No, it's not a logical thing, but I would not be surprised that deep changes occur in the way public collections are made, managed, kept, and brought to the public life. I think this is. I'm not gonna fantasize more, because I could really go far away at this moment. And to correct Conrado, I am an ex-director of a museum. So, but I think the major changes are about to occur in the museum world.
Can we open up? And
Yes,
follow
please.
that? Because I feel that you should. You're worried about eating at the same time.
You don't eat anymore. Now you can speak.
Because you were talking about sound, I just want to do a plug. There's this very lovely sound piece over at the Historical Museum of Catalonia by John Scoob. He's also accompanied by a great video, but because we were talking about sound, it was all about cellulose that was burned in a fire in the 30s or 40s, and all that remained, because at those times they separated sound from video. And so the soundtrack was still available. So this particular show, which you can see until Sunday, has the soundtrack playing and posters showing what the movie was, but you can never see the movie again. You can only hear the sound. Very, very interesting. So that's just a plug for that. What? Historical Museum of Catalonia. Definitely worthwhile organizing a trip over there. It's part of the Loop. It's part of the Loop program. So as many as possible should find a way over there and maybe also partake of that great restaurant on the top. Not that it may have great food, but it has wonderful views. I don't know if it has good food or not. I've never eaten it. The other thing I wanted to mention is when you talk about sound in museums, it should be a priority now of those who fund museums to make sure that there is at least an area of the museum which is acoustically set up for sound. It's not difficult. You can analyze rooms and make sure that they are perfect for sound, and it's not nearly that expensive. And it doesn't need carpets on the ceiling, it needs porous walls, it needs all sorts of crazy things. But it should be a priority, and those who fund museums today should insist that that be included.
Except that you will always... It never works, because an artist will always find a way to think that their work should be not exhibited where video should be shown. I mean, I would do the same. You get into a museum, and even if there is one room that is specially done for video, you think the video should be shown somewhere else because it looks better or it works better. So those planification never works really, I think. Don't you agree with me? It's like the artists are going too fast for you to establish a specific series of space for specific works. It doesn't work that way. You have to be following the work of the artist, and therefore you cannot prepare rooms. Don't you agree with that?
I completely agree. By the time you equip your museum for sound, the artist will have gone to the next step, which I don't know what will be, but in all cases, I think for a lot of the art that we have been collecting at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Barcelona dealt precisely with those problems. One work that we bought from Pierre Bismuth 4 or 5 years ago, in fact I saw in one of his first exhibitions at the Jan Mott Gallery about 500,000 years ago, when in the first place, when Jan Mott was still with his former partner, Bochart. Yeah. And that is, I'm going to describe the piece because, okay, no, I describe it, you tell me the title, okay? You enter a room and you see a projection in a corner high up on the wall of a text being typed, and the text describes actions of people and ambiances. He walks down the stairs, crosses the street, there is a car passing by, music, so on and so forth. And as you approach the projection, there is somewhere a pair of headphones that you can put on, and through the headphones you hear the breathing of someone who is supposedly, well, it's a feminine breathing, and you hear the noise of typing in those old computer keyboards with volume, not like these ones we have now that nearly you approach the finger to the letter and it's already typed. You don't need to touch anything. Those that you need to go deep in the something like that. And you hear actually the soundtrack of a film that the lady is transforming into a text. So what's the title?
And then you have to explain why you brought that up. But the piece is called Postscript the Passenger, and it's actually a piece I did based on the film by Michelangelo Antonioni, The Passenger. And I ask, the principle is very simple. I ask a typist to listen to the soundtrack of the film and to write down everything possible she could understand. So she's going through this very complicated operation of describing the dialogues of the film, but also the soundtrack and if there is music and so my idea was, at that time I was obsessed with the idea that only by being involved into a very descriptive operation, you are already in a kind of creative moment, and you have to select what kind of information you think is important to describe, and I wanted to show that this person, at that time I think I was interested in showing that everybody is everybody is creative, even though you're involved with things that you think has no creativity involved. So I did another piece at that time that was about choosing synonyms from synonyms, etc., which is a very stupid operation, just choosing one word that is as close as possible from the precedent one. But then by going from one synonym to another, you eventually reach a totally different meaning. So that was a bit the same idea. It was like, by just trying to describe the sound of a film, she would actually create something of her own. And so now you have to explain why you talked about that piece.
Well, I was interested, I'm going to try. I was interested in that piece because it was a complete negation of the image. And you have everything that surrounds the powerful screen where the moving images are parading. You have the soundtrack, you have the translation, you have the effort of the lady that you hear. She's concentrating very deeply, and she's nearly extenuated by transferring one field of perception into another field of perception. You know, it's like transporting an entire world through time and through a black hole into another galaxy. And it is extraordinarily simple in its mechanics, but I showed it in the context of a presentation of the exhibition that precisely tried to reconstruct that experience that I had described in the Van Abbe exhibition, that a world of three-dimensional voluminous things had transformed into a world where the volume was only to be pushed up or lowered down. It was audio. And audio had to do with time. Sculpture is timeless. It doesn't move unless it is a Bruce Nauman sculpture. Excuse me, I have to turn down. Yeah, it's switched off. In that regard, I thought that one of the questions also to link between the historical avant-gardes of the early 20th century and the avant-gardes of today was the use of time as material, not as a condition of perception, but as pure matter. And that I thought it was, at least for a while, it was interesting for me.
Now you talk about that, I remember. What time? When do we have to stop? Because I want to talk too long. Yeah. Okay. So I finished that, and then we. But I remember now the 90s saw a lot of exhibitions about art and films. And I think I remember now, and I wrote a text about that. One of the obsession with art and films at that time, I think I described it as a nostalgia for a public that was disappearing it's difficult to imagine today, because I would say that if something is not missing today in the art world, is a public. I think there is a lot of public. But in the 80s and 90s, art, I remember the discourse of art was like the death of contemporary art. The big conversation in the 80s was that is art still socially relevant? It's difficult to imagine today that we were like it's true or not? Like why art? I mean, it's like there is other forms that are more important than visual art, and one of those was films, and that's why I think a lot of curators of that time were very, very interested in films, is because film was one creative form that was still clearly having a public when visual art was kind of disappearing. And this already is quite fascinating to see how much have happened since. Yeah. I mean, that's not a question at all today. So you wanted to say something about that? Do you remember that time, or is it totally like...
No. I mean, Witte de Witte in Rotterdam had an audience of 16,000 people a year, which, I think now they are 17,000. But
70 or
17. But it's very reduced. But it was fine. The audience was not what the institution was about. It was about something else. Today, if you don't get 500,000 visitors a year, you're dead.
But you have them anyway. People want to see shows.
Hopefully, yes.
Seems, no?
Yes.
How much? What's
Yes.
the audience in the museum here?
It's about 500,000.
A year.
Anyway, questions from the audience, please, because I didn't know if you just noticed that we are beginning to run out of ideas. So, please.
How's the food?
Yeah, we'll.
That's it. Nobody wants to say anything.
Okay, then just to conclude, I would like to unveil a big secret. Is that Pierre and I were beginning to fantasize, and not only fantasize, but also speaking quite concretely about doing another show, and there was a beast that walked by, and unfortunately this show will not happen in Barcelona, but I will take it with me to the next professional adventure. Thank you.
Thank you.